I didn't even finish this interview. I got to 44 minutes. Whatever. But let's go back to the beginning. Or let's just continue where I was.
I do not watch. Yeah, I don't watch.
Yep, that's Elio.
Who's the last person? I sometimes watch the podcast that people have guests with. It's more kind of like History of Westeros. There's the Boiled Leather Audio Hour with Steven Saucett and Sean T. Collins.
I haven't watched
that.
Very
good. It's very insightful.
I probably should.
But I mean, yeah, there are creators that are definitely they're having fun. Is the best I can say. They're having fun. They're not. They're completely off of their own, off the reservation. In my opinion,
Yep. He true.
I won't name names. Okay. Because
I won't name names. And then he goes on to name David Lightbringer.
You're being nice. There are people.
Which, let's be honest, that's the name we were all thinking of when he said it. That's not too much of a dig at David Lightbringer because I'm a longtime watcher, viewer of him. I was aware of him the moment he came on to History of Westeros for the first time. I think that was his big debut, I guess you'd call it. I don't know. Sort of his first public appearance. And he's an interesting dude, man. David Lightbringer. Let's see what Elio says.
There are definitely out there theories that are like taking stuff from, especially stuff from The World of Empire, to be honest, to like if this some of this stuff was actually important to A Song of Ice and Fire.
Oh, I should probably headphone it.
Would have included it in A Song of Ice and Fire. He didn't imagine when he's writing A Song of Ice and Fire, but he would write The World of Ice and Fire, right? That was something that came out, and a lot of it is just he's just having fun with the form of these are stories from that a maester has cataloged and heard, and these are what sailors say about these far off places. He's just having fun of it. There's a lot of homaging to Lovecraft, to Robert E. Howard, and it's not. It's a part of the world like the oily black stone. That's a real thing in this.
Okay, universe, that's enough.
But it's
so well,
not a thing that's important.
Let's get a more reasonable face for Elio. So that's basically Elio's point in this interview with Culturescape. And that's the point that David Lightbringer objects to in his video over here. And I was just listening to three people, really. It's those two and Red Team Review or Carmine chime in on this situation. As I was listening to them, I was thinking, well, they're all like half wrong and half right. Where's the guy who's 90% right? Where is he at? We need him. So I guess I'll try to be him. But let me listen to some of LML for a minute.
Way off. Let's just say that. Let's keep it rolling.
I won't name names.
Okay.
Because
you're being nice.
There are people who are just there are definitely out there people.
So Elio Garcia, the first guy, is one of George R. R. Martin's co-authors and advisors or whatever. Like, Elio and his wife Linda keep track of a lot of the like obscure details of A Song of Ice and Fire. And they're sort of George R. R. Martin's encyclopedia. If he doesn't know something, he needs an answer quickly, he'll just ask them, like, hey, what color are so-and-so's eyes, or whatever. He brought them in as co-authors to help him write The World of Ice and Fire.
Series that are like taking stuff from, especially stuff.
And LML, or no, David Lightbringer. Previously, Lucifer means Lightbringer, or LML. Is he's in A Song of Ice and Fire, like, personality slash theorist slash analyst. He's a fun dude, man. He's a fun dude.
From The World of Empire, to be honest, to like if this some of this stuff was actually important to A Song of Ice and Fire, George would have included it in A Song of Ice and Fire. He didn't.
So I don't know if you heard that, But he said if some of this stuff wasn't actually important to A Song of Ice and Fire, he would have actually included it in A Song of Ice and Fire. He did include it in A Song of Ice and Fire, if you count the expanded works part of A Song of Ice and Fire, which they are. The expanded works are literally in-story history books that exist in the story, ostensibly. Or canonically, I should say. It's kind of weird to hear Elio say that and be dismissive about that. But also, there's some truth to it too. Like, I think what he means by A Song of Ice and Fire is the main series, from A Game of Thrones to A Dance with Dragons. And he's right that most of the content of the extended books, or let's call them expansion books, are not part of that main series, and that the main series is basically like the entree, and that's the magnum opus, and that's the thing that matters the most. And the other books are really just that. They're expansions or add-ons that are fun and interesting and all that. But at the end of the day, what matters is that main story. And I think that's right too. That's obviously right. But they relate to each other and they have a lot of interplay. And that's where a lot of the fun of the extended books comes from.
Imagine he's writing A Song of Ice and Fire, but he would write The World of Ice and Fire, right? That was a...
So I just have to. We're going to talk more about this, but I just think it's funny. As you can see, here we have George's co-authors of The World of Ice and Fire telling us that it doesn't really matter. It's not relevant to the story. I don't know if George would agree with that, but we'll get into that. Anyways,
Song of Ice and Fire.
Let it roll here.
He didn't imagine when he's writing A Song of Ice and Fire, but he would write The World of Ice and Fire, right? That...
To me, it seems like they only disagree about what matters. Maybe for Elio, what matters to him ultimately is the main storyline. But to like highly involved fans like David Lightbringer and me, and active, because Elio's not really that active, they do matter. It's like, yeah, we want to know all the secrets of The World of Ice and Fire and Blood too, and the author's intentions and purpose and meaning and all that, and what's going to happen next with Blood and Fire, the sequel to Fire and Blood. So to me, it seems like their disagreement is really just about a difference of opinion in what matters to them personally, as well as a difference in activity, where LML is like doing the day-to-day work of being involved with a story. And Elio is not doing that. He's not concerned with making regular content about A Song of Ice and Fire and penetrating its mysteries and all that. Even though he does from time to time like reading.
It was something that came out, and a lot of it is just he's just having fun with the form of these are stories from that a maester has cataloged and heard, and these are what sabers say about these far off places. He's just having fun of it. There's a lot of homaging to Lovecraft to...
So I would agree that George R. R. Martin is having fun with it, but I would disagree that he's just having fun with it. They definitely connect to the main series and are and will increasingly be consequential to what happens in the main series, in the way that knowing history is consequential to what happens in the present. It's like the people who know it are just going to have an advantage over the people who don't. And if you want to see an example of that, there's one in my series about Doran's Letter. The people who've studied the First Dornish War know some important things about dragons that are going to be consequential in any wars that involve dragons that are to come in the future.
Robert E. Howard, and it's a part of the world like the oily black stone. That's a real thing in this universe, but it's not a thing that's important to A Song of Ice and Fire.
Balin Greyjoy sends his regards. Oily Black Stone, of course, is in book 1. Not just The World of Ice and Fire. Hello. Say hello to Kaiju Cleo. Sea Stone Chair, book 1. Again, Balin Greyjoy sends his regards. But I digress. Cleo.
Oily Black Stone. I have no idea what the purpose of that is in the story. Yeah, what it means or anything. But again, I'm kind of like split between them because they're both part right and part wrong. Like, the Oily Black Stone probably won't matter so much for like the political plots and stuff, though that's possible. It just seems a little unlikely. But what it almost certainly matters for is the symbolism of the story. Oily Black Stone is not a real thing. And because it's not real, it has to be symbolic of something that is real in order to be meaningful to us, the people reading it. And George R. R. Martin knows that. And so the safest bet is that the Oily Black Stone is symbolic of something in the real world. And it's just a question of what. That's like the minimum that must be true about the Oily Black Stone. And that matters. To those of us who care about symbolism, that matters. To people who only care about plot, I can see why it wouldn't matter to them. But this is a difference of opinion.
As this Lightbringer guy, I won't name names.
Okay.
This Lightbringer guy, I think he has a lot to do with like the astronomy and like constellations.
We have to be honest here. Lightbringer does have the most off-the-wall theories that are popular. There might be people who have more off-the-wall theories than him, but if there are, they're not as popular as him. And he knows this. He's very well aware of this, and he embraces it. And it's part of his charm, I think. But if you're going to do that, you also have to like humble yourself and not get your panties in a twist when somebody says, "Hey, I think most of what you're saying is nonsense." You're building speculations on top of speculations on top of speculations, and you abandoned the text at the 2-minute mark, which from my experience is characteristic of most of his theories. They make sense for up to 2 minutes, and then he's totally off in the stratosphere on his own speculations, and along the way he's insisting that he's got the right of it, and that you just have to believe and pay more attention if you don't get it. So it's a really cultish way to get people to believe you, but it works. As he's proven, you get a big audience doing that. And David, he's aware that this is the situation because he gives voice to it once in a while. Like, yeah, I know, I'm just the crazy one. But I think he's kind of caught in the middle between wanting to be respected as a credible source of a Song of Ice and Fire analysis and wanting to be entertaining. Because he does have a good sense of symbolism. I mostly agree with David in this disagreement for that reason. But let's keep watching.
I mean, we tried to get George to do a constellation,
I just want to stop and thank Elio for not saying astrology. I hate that. This is not... We don't talk about astrology here, really, hardly ever. It's symbolism based on the stars is not astrology. He didn't say astrology. A lot of people do. So I do want to just say thank you for not saying astrology, but carry on, Elio.
Can we do like a star map?
I recently saw a dating profile that said, if you have your astrology sign posted, swipe left. I thought that's a great idea, but I would reverse it for mine. Mine would say, if you don't think astrology is kind of cool and fun, swipe left.
Like a maestro star map. Because he's named constellations, he's named planets, the 9 wanderers, and so on. So yeah, that'd be kind of cool to have George. And George he wasn't interested in it. And to me, that's like, okay, it's not because he reveals secrets. It's because it's not. It's just color. It's just part of a color of a setting to have some of these details. It's not really relevant to anything thematic or storytelling wise.
Wrong. It's going to be relevant thematically, and because it's relevant thematically, it'll be relevant in terms of storytelling. Because storytellings are fundamentally themes. That's what makes them stories, is that they're united by one consistent idea. And that's what a theme is. So, Elio's just out of the game. Like, he's not playing the same game that we're playing, of trying to understand the story, and even teach it to some extent, and to penetrate its mysteries, and bring them to light. That's all it is. It's like, He's out of the game. It's not to discredit him. There's a lot of people who feel this way, who are in the game. And from my experience, they tend to be people who lean more towards like literal analysis. Like they'll analyze the historical inspirations or the geographical inspirations and things like that, which is unique and interesting and useful in its own right. But it's not going to penetrate the story's mysteries. though some of what you learn from it might help you, eventually you're going to hit a dead end where the symbolism of the story is going to become impenetrable because your approach is not accommodating symbolism. Like, if you approach it in terms of historical analysis, there's nothing about historical analysis that's going to permit symbolic translations like blonde, purple-eyed human to dragon. Because obviously a human is never literally going to be a dragon. Just symbolically.
On. So yeah, that'd be kind of cool to have Doris, and Doris should have he wasn't interested in it. And to me, that's like, okay, it's not because he reveals secrets, it's because it's not. It's just color. It's just part of a color of a setting to have some of these details. It's not really relevant to anything thematic or storytelling wise.
Muted. Thank you. I've got no co-host. Sorry. Yeah. But I think you guys probably figured out what I was saying. So yeah, the astronomy theories have nothing to do with the themes. References to Lovecraft, nothing to do with the themes. The thing that he said real quick that you might not have caught, there was something about a rumor about George doing a star map. I heard that they did it and that it got cut from the World of Ice and Fire. Elio is saying here that he pitched it to George and that George wasn't interested in it. And then he says, well, to me, that means that it wasn't important. It's not that the star map would have revealed secrets. I can tell you why George wasn't interested in doing a star map. Because he's using all the same constellations that we are. So it wouldn't look any different. They just have different names. Sword of the Morning is pretty obviously Orion. The ice dragon that contains the pole star is obviously Draco, which used to contain the pole star because the pole star shifts over time. So, yeah, that's probably why we didn't get a star chart, is because it's...
That's kind of what I was talking about right there. He'll just make claims like that without backing them up. And he'll reference a video, like an hour-long video, as backup. And then you go and watch it, and it still doesn't make sense. But if you don't go and watch it, you could tend to give him the benefit of the doubt. Like, okay, let's suppose that he's just right. I don't know. I don't have time to watch all that, you know? And you can see how, like, this strategy would be useful for retaining viewership and getting people on these, like, viewership cycles. Where it's like, oh, if I want to understand the thing I'm watching, I've got to go watch another thing. And then if I want to understand that, I've got to go watch this other thing. And there's just this cycle of stuff you got to watch to supposedly understand his theories. And after you get like 3 videos into it, you should start to realize that this guy's just, he's BSing. To put it, well, there's not really a nicer way to put it. That's kind of what it is. He's BSing.
It's the same stars, so we don't really. But yeah, let me let it roll. I've got notes here. I just want to get through this real quick.
I would be very, very shocked if some of the theories related to this came true.
It is fascinating to think about that, and it's
which, by the way, is kind of at the heart of this. My theories are ambitious. They always have been. I was on Elio's forum back in 2014, 2015, posting these theories. There are certain people that are always going to be turned off by anybody with an ambitious theory that attempts to like solve the big puzzles. That's not anything having to do with me or how great I am or anything else. Anybody that does that will be met with resistance.
I agree with everything he just said there. Yes, if you try to come up with an ambitious theory that does not align with the set of accepted theories about the story, you would just be rejected almost completely. At best, you'll get like a tiny little group of people like, hey, we're curious about this. We're kind of tired of the status quo in the theory game. We want something a little different.
I learned that early on. So that's why I put the cry face. Yeah, a lot of people will be upset if moon meteors cause a new long night. But that's okay.
time, because we've had this hang.
Moon meteors cause the new long night. No, that's never happening. It's just silly, you know? It's like, it's self-evidently wrong. And like, it would be hard to convince him that they're wrong, obviously, but it's because it has nothing to do with people, you know? It's like, okay, so let's suppose that moon meteors do come in and like crash into the planet or something and cause the long night. How does that have anything to do with the human heart in conflict with itself? Which is what George says he tries to write about. It's the only thing worth writing about. It doesn't. It's just like a big explosion, which is, you know, cool in its own right, but it just isn't meaningful. And everything about the story's style so far indicates that George R. R. Martin aims for meaning, not spectacle. He's not averse to spectacle, but when he has it, he wants it to have meaning. A lot of meaning.
Time between Dance of Dragons and Winds of Winter.
Yeah.
Like, people have come up with just so much of their own fan theories and content. And it's some of it's really crazy, but it reminds me of, you know, I'm Christian. It reminds me of people who are like reading, like trying to grab new meaning from like scripture, or like Kabbalah. People have said this a lot about Kabbalah, and they're trying to extract like entire things. They just aren't there, but they're kind of like torturing the text to get out of it. That's what it reminds me of. I think it's, I watch some of the lore videos and I get a chuckle out of them. I think it's fun to like imagine, like, okay, so this reference to Lovecraft, that means that the deep ones are going to play a big role in Winds of Winter. And I'm like, probably not. But
Yeah.
So I think LML is getting his feelings hurt now a little bit because they're flashing his videos on the screen. And see, I don't have as much sympathy for him as I would maybe otherwise have had, because I've seen him censor people for disagreeing with his theories. And to me, that's unacceptable. Like, you can disagree with them, but there's no grounds for censoring them. If they come in and say, I don't think R plus L equals J, or I think Daenerys is going to be the villain in the books like she was in the show, and then he just freaking bans them from his chats and from his whatever, from his comments. He's done it to me. And if after the show you're one of the people saying, well, this ending makes perfect sense for Daenerys, considering the path she was on, one of David's responses to that was to flip 2 middle fingers at his camera and tell them, fuck you, basically. I think he's matured a little bit since then. Hopefully we all have. But if that's how you're going to treat people who disagree with you, you can't be surprised when your predictions are wrong, when other people think your theories are wrong, and people begin to reference you as somebody who is often wrong. Since the beginning of time, the cost of being right has always been and will always be the ability to admit that you're wrong when you're wrong. But he's absolutely certain that he's got the truth. And that's why he can't admit that his theories are wrong.
So let me just say, I asserted that the deep ones are real. I did not assert that the deep ones are going to take over Winds of Winter. They're definitely not. But they are real. So thanks for watching the video.
I think it's fun to make the theories and so on.
And I just want to highlight how much Elio loves fun and theories. He said several times, it's lots of fun. Clearly, he's a fun guy, likes doing fun stuff. So we're definitely not putting down people having fun at all.
When as soon as you started to connect, and this is going to happen because in Also Always a Fire, because of this, that's the part where it's like, no, this is part of the world, but it's not part of the story of Also Always a Fire.
David Lightbringer has done some research on like storytelling and story interpretation and symbolism. Like, he references Joseph Campbell a lot, and Joseph Campbell is like one of the best guys if you want to understand storytelling and symbolism and mythology and all that. So he has a good foundation for story interpretation. He just doesn't apply it all the time. He'll abandon it in reaching for an idea that he likes. Or he'll just do it in bad form.
So Always a Fire story is a very limited story of a particular slice of time, particular events, that doesn't have to connect, to every piece of lore that's out there. A lot of the lore is really just color.
And there we have it. A short film by Elio Garcia. A lot of the lore is really just color. So, guys, I'm having fun here, obviously. But I do want to say a couple of things right at the top. So, hi, Elio. You know my name. The interviewer said David Lightbringer at the beginning. Said, have you ever watched channels like David Lightbringer? Then he's like, I'm not going to name names, but that Lightbringer guy. Now, in fairness, I did used to call myself Lucifer Means Lightbringer, and now I'm David Lightbringer. So that Lightbringer guy, I mean, he changes his name all the time. That's fair. But yes, hi.
Yeah, Lightbringer is getting more reasonable by the year. Like in the past, he wouldn't have said that. He would have just saw Elio as an enemy. He needs to be combated. So that's good to see. And then Red Team Review. He's commenting on what we just watched. Let me see.
And YouTube memberships. Please see the link in the description for more details.
So the next topic they discuss is theories. Again, Elio is one of the people closest to George who has worked with him and hangs out with him every now and then. So this is the guy that if anybody would know George's thoughts on this topic, it would be Elio. So the host asked him if there anything to some of the more popular theories online. I don't want to harp on the guy asking the questions too much, but he seems like he's an Ice and Fire fan. And I don't know if he just did surface level research or he's in the know, but he brings up a few creators like, of course, Alt-Shift-X and one or two other people, but he didn't mention you. And I always find I find that a little weird because you kind of popularized theory crafting on YouTube. Obviously, theory crafting existed before you came on the scene, but in terms of making YouTube videos about it, I'm pretty sure you were the first.
Well, I mean, it's funny because like, Alt-Shift-X is not really a theory guy. I mean, he has videos that summarize the theories, but I don't know if he comes up with his own.
I have no idea. And Elio, according to Elio, he doesn't watch many Game of Thrones YouTubers, but in regards to those theories, he mentions how a lot of them who craft stuff are completely off. He won't name names.
Alt-Shift-X is not a theory guy.
Some of these theories are not George's intentions. Specifically, he brings up the oily black stone. And while it exists in the world, it's not important to the world of Ice and Fire. He also brings up one person's astrology theory and how Elio and Linda, tried to get George to do something with that in regards to the constellations.
I don't understand all of the obsession with the oily black stone. It's such an obscure, small thing. I get that it's mysterious, but like it's a stone. Who cares that much? I don't know. There's not even a prophecy related to them. I think that's what interests me the most, is the prophecies. Because those are symbolic of stories. And so it creates this like storyception dynamic where it's a story within a story. And so you've got to apply the principles of storytelling on the in-story story and the out-of-story story at the same time. So it makes this really complicated investigation into A Song of Ice and Fire's mystery.
Then, maybe a Maester star map. But George was not interested. To George, it's just color. It's just the color of a setting. It's there to add in detail, and it's not really important or relevant to anything in the story, even in a thematic sense. And a lot of what we just seen is just color, and it's just there to add fluff, and it doesn't connect to the overall story. And when I spoke to you about this last week, you mentioned how when you first heard Elio talk about fan theories, you didn't really buy it. But now...
Well, so there was an early...
So, no, not even George R. Martin thinks that his world building is just color. He puts a lot of thought into it, and makes creative decisions that work symbolically. Where, for example, winter in the story and summer are seasons, just like they are in real life. But winter in the story is also symbolic of hard times. And summer in the story is symbolic of good times. And then spring is symbolic of the transition from the hard times to the good times. And so when we have something like the long night, which is a night that lasts for years and generations, where people are born, live, and die all in darkness, The symbolic meaning of what that is that it's hard times. It's a very long span of hard times. And the reason George R. R. Martin doesn't like allegory is because allegory tries to fix what's being symbolized in the symbol. Where they'll look at the hard times that George R. R. Martin was living through at the time he wrote the story, or even at the time they're reading the story, and then try to say that's what's being symbolized. It's like, well, no. It's one of the things that's being symbolized, because what the thing in the real world and the thing in the story have in common is hard times. But it's not the only thing that the thing in the story is symbolizing. Winter in the story can symbolize any kind of hard times, whether that's war or economic hard times or whatever. And ultimately, what the thing in the story, in this case winter, symbolizes is everything that constitutes hard times. It's all the bad stuff that human beings have to live through. And so whatever the oily black stone is symbolizing, it's probably something like that. Like, what would be the oily black stone equivalent in real life? Well, it would be a really old natural feature that can be found all over the world, but it's pretty rare and it's mysterious. And that's kind of it, as far as I know. That's all I can remember about the oily black stone. So maybe ancient relics. It would be a great symbolic translation for oily black stone. Maybe oily black stone is the A Song of Ice and Fire version of ancient relics that we don't understand yet. Among other things, no doubt. For instance, maybe there's a mineral or something we don't understand, but it's everywhere. That would match the oily black stone too. I just don't know enough about minerals to name one off the top of my head.
Interview I watched with Elio where Elio was talking about theories, and he kind of said he didn't believe that George really thought about it that deeply. And so Elio has been saying that kind of stuff for a while. And, you know, certainly when I first finished A Dance with Dragons and I kind of read my first theory blog, which is by Bran Vross, it's very convincing after getting out of like a theory video or a theory blog that George has thought this all out and that the clues are there, because there is a lot of fucking detail in what George is saying. And he does refer to random details in the past and things like that. And it feels like he's weaving this incredible narrative. And Elio's kind of saying, nah, he's not really thinking about it. You know, he's a human being. And yeah, I suppose over time, like now that 13 years have passed and I realize, and there isn't a book, and you're like, oh God, like maybe you start questioning it. You're like, maybe George didn't have it all figured out. Maybe he was just making stuff up as he went along, and like some, you know, a lot of random details that you think are important. He just put them in as random details. Like,
but how is that possible though? Because you just brought it up. Like, how is that possible that he just stumbled into it or by accident just added in like so many clues that all add up, like here, and here? Like, I'm reminded of that meme, I'm sure you've seen of it, of Charlie from Always Sunny, where he's on the board and he's connecting the dots and stuff. Like, you kind of feel that way after going through the material, like you have. You're like, this is all connecting, this is all coming together. And here you have like this guy coming in and saying, nah. So that all like by accident?
I definitely don't. I don't think I will. I don't think I'm at the Elio level.
Yes, this is cool to see that they're kind of saying the same thing I was saying. Like, Elio just doesn't get it. Yes, there's all kinds of really meaningful connections going on in the story everywhere. I can hardly read a chapter without stumbling over a few of them. And I don't even know everything about the story yet. Like, how many am I going to stumble over once I know everything? Who knows? But it's like I said, Elio's just out of the game. Like, we like to think that the co-author would be in the know, like the author, but he isn't. And the red team's tendency is to think that he is. Under this video, I commented that Elio knows a lot about the story, but he doesn't know the endings to the mysteries. And Red Team said if anybody knows the ending beats of the story, it's Elio Garcia. So apparently Red Team does not think that George R. R. Martin would have, or maybe could have, not told all or many of the big secrets at the center of A Song of Ice and Fire's mysteries to his co-author. But it's absolutely possible, especially because the only book that he co-authored with was an expansion book. It wasn't a main series book. And it was ancillary to the main material. And so you don't need to have the secret knowledge of what happened with Robert's Rebellion, Turian Harrenhal, Rhaegar and Lyanna, so on and so on, in order to write the histories of, like, the Riverlands or whatever. So why would George give him that information if he doesn't need it? There's no reason to. It's just an unnecessary risk. And what's funny is that George R. R. Martin is on record, on video, saying, I suspect some of the fans know more than anybody in regards to the story's mysteries. Because that comment suggests that the answers to the story's mysteries can be divined by a fan who's sufficiently obsessed and willful about it. And, well, I'm one of those. I responded to Red Team that Elio does not know the endings and resolutions to those mysteries. And the way that I know Elio doesn't know is because I know them, and I've listened to Elio. And naturally, Red Team was a little mocking in his response to that. But I don't fault him for it. It's totally understandable. As David Lightbringer just recently said, whenever someone approaches a big community that's been working on the same mysteries for a very long time, in this case 28 years, and that person says, hey, I've been studying privately and I've figured out the answers to almost all of the questions that you want answers to, there's a big uproar because nobody's going to believe it, because in large part nobody wants to believe it, because it stands in judgment of them. How could he be right so quickly when we've been wrong for so long? Of course, the answer is embedded in the question. It was me studying the quality of your wrongness that helped me become right.
Because, for instance, Elio doesn't think there's any secret to the pink letter. Like, he thinks that, like, the pink letter is just written by Ramsay, and then all these people are wasting their time. Like, it's just straightforward. And I was like, I don't know. I still think there's something with the pink letter. It just seems off. Like, everybody reads the book on their first read and is like, this seems off. But even Elio's just like, no, you're overanalyzing it. You're thinking about it too much. George does like bringing back old stuff. I was thinking in Tough Voyaging, there is a random character early in a story that comes back again at the end. And there's no reason to bring the character back. He's in a completely different role, but they're just like I think in one of them, Tough runs into some dude on a train and he talks to him. And then later the guy from the train comes back as I forget, maybe as an emissary of some sort. And there's no reason that that character should have been brought back, but he just brought him back as an Easter egg. And so, it could be that George likes to bring back Easter eggs, but it doesn't necessarily mean there was a grand plan the whole time. Take the
A Song of Ice and Fire does have Easter eggs, but they're pretty rare. Ned Bean is an Easter egg. It's like, hey, look, if you're familiar with the show and its actors, you'll recognize that the character Ned Bean, or Black Bean, is inspired by Sean Bean, who played Ned Stark. So the character is a combination of Ned Stark's name and Ned Stark's actor's name. Ned Bean. And there's, as far as I can tell, there's no deeper meaning to that character or that name or anything. Certainly not any meaning that relates to the TV show at all, but except for that one way. And so that's something I would consider an Easter egg. The Muppets, I think the Muppets are in the story. They're all Tullys. There's Elmo and whoever the frick else. I don't know the Muppets. I'm sorry. Their Muppetness does not seem to have any bearing on the story or the meaning of that part of the story or anything like that. And so that too I would consider an Easter egg. Now if somebody could find some sort of deeper meaning to it, then I would call it an inspiration. Like, okay, like maybe like whatever the relationship was between the Muppets is preserved in A Song of Ice and Fire characters that are named after the Muppets. At that point, I would say, okay, this is an inspiration, not just an Easter egg, because there's some quality of the real life source that's preserved in the art.
Take the tapestries, right? The fucking tapestries, right? Like in a Game of Thrones, the tapestries are on the wall. You hear about them getting tossed down. They're in a corner. They get boxed up. And then Littlefinger asks for them.
In feast,
and Cersei
yeah.
sends them. And then he pulls them out and he hangs them on the wall. And they're in the Winds of Winter, hanging on the wall. People are looking at these tapestries. Now, does George have a master plan for?
I am woefully uninterested in the Pink Letter. And maybe that's just because I haven't read it recently. I'm sure if I just went and read those chapters, I would become interested in it. But I don't know who wrote it. I don't have any idea of who wrote it. I'm just going to assume that it's who signed it. It was Ramsey. And be pleasantly surprised if I'm wrong. And the tapestries, I don't know what's going on with those either. But I'm more interested in those, even though I haven't looked into them or anything. They just strike me as something more interesting and more, probably more meaningful. There's probably more commentary on me than the story, but yeah, I think there is something going on there because they are preserved. That's really the marker of when something's important. So when it recurs or is preserved.
For these tapestries. So the tapestry is going to be important. Or is he just Easter egging himself? He's like, well, I mentioned these tapestries in a Game of Thrones, and I'm just bringing them along. I'm just throwing along these Easter eggs. Like, it might just be that. Or maybe there's something super important that he's been planning forever with this, with the tapestries. But it's hard to believe that, like, back in 1993, that he had some master plan with these tapestries. You know, or like you start getting to the point where you start looking at all these details and be like, oh, did George really have like 1,000 threads that he'd planned out that he was going to interweave? No. Well, you find out that he's a gardener, that he just like, he writes as if all possibilities can happen. And then he picks and chooses the ones, and then people go, oh my God, it's been foreshadowed. Well, you foreshadowed everything, you know?
George R. R. Martin's gardener description of his style of writing is so overblown in the A Song of Ice and Fire fandom that people are going to be shocked when they see how a lot of these plots resolve and symbolisms resolve. The resolutions are going to expose how planned a lot of the story was, especially the parts that seem to them to be unplanned. And I even wonder, like, if the notion that George R. R. Martin does not have a plan is really just a comfortable explanation for why they can't figure out the answers to the mysteries despite having tried for 28 years already. The mysteries challenged our intellect, and our society places a really high value on intellect. And some of it's warranted, but some of it's a little too much. Intellect is not everything. When people encounter something that's obviously challenging their intellect and they can't solve it, some of those people get frustrated and then look for comfortable explanations like this. Like, George just doesn't have a plan. He doesn't know what he's doing. That's why he can't finish the book. It's like, no, he has a plan. That's why he can't finish the book. He's dedicated to the quality of it.
Like, you know, it's like I'm saying, like, maybe he's going to pick door number 1. Maybe he's going to pick door number 2. Maybe he's going to pick door number 3. He picks door number 2. Oh, I foreshadowed it by saying maybe he's going to pick door number 2. So it might just be that these are all just, that we're all like been looking for these threads and been forming these theories. And in fact, it's just George randomly bringing up Easter eggs and he has no fucking plan. And, you know, Elio's right. So who knows? Because clearly if he had a plan and he knew where this story was going, it wouldn't take 13 fucking years.
Yeah, well, that's what having a cameo in Sharknado does to you. It puts you off track. It puts you off track.
I already just sort of preempted my response to that before they said it. Well, that was fun. Final thoughts. I think that's all I wanted to say. Hopefully that provides a more reasonable middle ground between the world building matters and the world building doesn't matter. Thanks for watching, guys. Until next time.